Hi, Kaza. Welcome to 10 by 6.
Hello, Jason. How are you doing?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, shall I call you Kaza or shall I call you Caroline?
You can call me Kaz, as usual. Yeah, that's fine.
Brilliant. That's wonderful. Thank you. Well, we're going to focus over the next 10 minutes or so just looking at your quite public resignation in terms of your association with Shell, the oil company. And you're briefly going to tell us why you did it, why you made a reasonably profound statement, what it is that they're doing wrong in your eyes, and what can they do more generally in order to change and be much more an appropriate and acceptable corporation. So over to you, Kaz.
Yeah, thanks. So I've worked with Shell for about 11 years on their safety culture stuff, really just trying to help them improve safety performance and safety culture in their frontline operations. So not in like offices and stuff, but on the rigs, in the gas plants, refineries, etc. And I've been really happy to kind of like do that work in the sense of I believed it was helping to prevent people from getting harmed, injuries and fatalities, and also preventing bigger environmental impacts like the one we saw in 2010 with Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico. So that was the purpose. What I wasn't ever happy about really was working for the fossil fuel industry, full stop. I was very uncomfortable about that, because of the pollutions. Back in the day, 2010, 2011, when we started this, it wasn't so much about greenhouse gases. It was just like the pollution to the local environments where they were operating. As time went on, probably, people may know that I was involved with sort of like green politics here in Dorset, and that's when I started to understand a bit more about climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. And so that discomfort kind of increased, but you still rationalize it and tell yourself, well, the job I'm doing still helps prevent harms and, helping to protect the environment. And then 3 years ago, just over, the Extinction Rebellion started giving talks in Dorset, and I went to one of those and thought, oh my God, I understand this now, and my discomfort with the oil and gas industry increased as my awareness for climate change and ecological collapse increased. So, then you really have to question yourself, what are you doing? I still believe that the work I did had value and helped prevent some of the worst local outcomes from oil leaks, gas leaks, explosions, fires. But I just started to think, Shell are not changing direction on this. They are absolutely hell-bent, in my view, from my observation, to go after as much oil and gas as they can get out of the ground, including stuff they don't yet have license for, but that's what they're seeking. And I just thought, I'm working on improving their safety, and their tagline for their safety ambition is do no harm to people and no leaks. Yet on a global scale, they are doing so much harm that it makes what they're doing on the micro level to protect individual workers or to, protect individual local environments, seem meaningless, because, if they are putting the planetary system, under so much pressure it is about to fall over, they wouldn't do that to one of their own systems. If they were doing that to one of their own operating systems, they just wouldn't, they wouldn't put it under that much pressure because they know it would blow. And they don't care that, our planetary systems are about to fall over or are already falling over. And that's really why I just thought, what, I can't do this anymore. The burden of that disconnect between my values and what I feel I stand for and what they stand for going forward, there's no sign of them changing direction. It's all greenwash. It's all greenwash. Everything they say about net zero, it's not real. It's not happening at the front line. Nobody at the front line talks about that. And so I just thought, I can't do this. And I just thought, what, if I'm going to leave, I want it to have impact. Hence, I did what I did.
Fantastic, in the sense that you made that symbolic gesture, but it does sound from this end that it's without really, really radical major structural change, I mean, economically and politically, Shell would just keep doing what they're doing, as for many other corporations, because ultimately it's just about the balance sheet. and it's just about, you know, the annual returns and the feedback to shareholders and the CEO, et cetera, et cetera, we are almost irrelevant, because the long-term survival of the planet is not something that will interest people, for example, high up at Shell, because the chances are that when the real impact of their behavior occurs, they'll be long gone.
Yeah.
And they don't have that appreciation of being able to pass on the baton to the next generation, so the next generation are actually advantaged by the behavior of the previous generation. It's almost like the complete reverse of that. But taking that as it is, how do you see, if you could go into Shell now, you know, if somebody basically said to you, you know, here's the Willy Wonka ticket, you can go in to Shell and you can create it in your own image, so to speak, your own utopian perspective, how would you do it?
Yeah, well, actually, they have everything they need to create a rapid transition. You know, they've got enormous amounts of capital, so they've got financial backing. Let's see where that backing comes from. Oh, I know, it comes from governments with massive subsidies. It comes from, you know, like, it comes from investors, you know, investors putting our pension funds in, you know, so there's two massives, and it comes from huge tax breaks. So the likes of Shell and BP don't pay any tax. I mean, the windfall tax is laughable, and if they're reinvesting that into fossil fuel production, they're only paying 9p in every pound. So, you know, so they've got huge capital, and they've got their own, you know, their own generated cash as well. They've got human resource, you know, they've got people, and they've got technological capabilities. You know, they have been pioneers in engineering. They know this stuff. So they could turn that to renewables, couldn't they, if they wanted to, really very quickly. And as far as I can see, and what I've been exposed to, they're not doing that, but they could. You know, there's one area that they are looking at, which is hydrogen, blue hydrogen. Now, I think they're doing that because it's expensive, so it justifies that investment. It seems like they're not really after the kind of renewables that are cheaper for us to buy. I think because they haven't worked out how to monetize, you know, they haven't worked out how to really profit from that. Yet they could, you know, they could be doing this. So they've got offshore expertise, you know, they could be saying to their guys, look, don't worry about the transition, it's going to be fair, there are jobs for you, you know, you can have, you know, you can reapply your engineering capabilities, even working offshore. You know, there's all of this that they can do, and they're not, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I can see, they're not really doing that. They have no interest in the renewable transition. When they talk about it, you know, they talk about net zero, they really are pushing it as far out as they can to 2050, and I think they mean by that they'll start acting on it in 2049. You know, that's when, because when you hear them speak, Ben van Beurden, the CEO, says we will carry on, you know, extracting for decades to come. Well, that's not what the International Energy Agency is saying we need to do. You know, they need to say no more new oil and gas extraction. You know, no one is saying turn the tap off right now, because we would have absolute societal mayhem if we do that. We're not ready, but they could be transitioning. And I would have loved to have stayed doing the job that I was doing, because I loved the job that I did. If I thought for one moment they were going to look for a safe transition, but they're not. But they could do. You know, they really could. They could do that. And that's what I would do. I say, well, let's put all that, you know, let's put at least half of all the investment that you get into transitioning, you know, but they're not interested. They are genuinely not interested. And people I've spoken to who've approached me, you know, since I quit, who've approached me by messages or Zoom, you know, they've made it very clear, you know, they're only after one thing, and that's the money. They are just after the money, and they honestly don't care. They don't care. They don't think they're going to be affected by climate change. They know it's real, but they don't think it will be a reality for them. You know, they don't think it's going to affect their operations, and they don't care about the communities that they're operating in.
And to finish off as well, one of the major sort of points I seem to get from my analysis is that we used to have this perspective that you had governments and then you had corporations that tend to invest a lot of money in lobbying. I think that's spun now. I think now governments are the lobbyists for corporations.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the way in which we behave in parts of Africa, in terms of Venezuela, in and around the Falklands of Argentina, and up in terms of the poles, I think the search for oil is being led by the corporations, and the governments have just expected to fall in line. And they fall in line, obviously, with backhanders, and they fall in line with relationships that are unhealthy for the planet, but healthy for a very, very, very small number of people. And it's almost now, it's a different problem we have to overcome. Actually going to governments now seems pointless. It's almost like we have to do something focused on, as you have, directly at the corporations.
Yeah, agreed. And and the other side of it, I mean, you'd ask me what I do if I step back into Shell. That's what I would want them to do. But actually, we have to start to question: does that model even work anymore? Does that model of energy provision really work? Is it fit for our future? Because they've proven they can't be trusted. They can't be trusted to not harm us, to not harm the planet on this huge scale. So is it time actually that we completely remodel how we generate energy, and look much more for community energy schemes, because they are successful. We've got one in Dorset, haven't we? In Bridport, there's a really Dorset community energy, proven this that they've done it through solar. That could become much easier to do through onshore wind, if planning permissions were more easily granted. So we've got a question, actually, has the 20th century model really worked? And I'm not out to shame oil and gas workers who've done a hard job in really difficult environments, high risk environments that most of us wouldn't want to go and work in, frankly, and there's no shame what they've done. Although the oil and gas industry have caused massive harms, as it turns out, they've also helped the world to develop in many ways. We wouldn't be living the way we are now. But you've got to think, is that the model for the future? It doesn't feel very futuristic to me, where we've got these 5, 6, 7, 8 huge companies who are controlling all the energy provision, don't really care about how it affects people, how they get at it, the price that people have to pay. They're only interested in the profit. And I guess since certainly in this country, and probably across Europe as well, the privatization of energy provision, that really kick-started this massive drive for profitability, which we never had back in the day when British Gas was owned by the British people. We probably didn't have we had a little bit more control over it now. Whereas you're right, I think you're absolutely right. We are being led, we're being led by the nose by these corporations who are just so powerful. And it would be interesting to see what happens in Australia, since we've had this change of government, and people voted based on it's our first kind of climate change government. The people there voted based on their experiences with climate change, and you just think it will be interesting to see what happens with their relationship with the fossil fuel companies.
Leaving it at a positive place is always the most ideal option. Thank you so much, Casa, for coming on 10 by 6, and we'll catch up with you again hopefully soon, if there's any more positive developments, let's say. Thank you. Take care. See you soon.
Thanks, Jason.